Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take your sources notes, research, historical texts, and really unpack the critical knowledge inside.
And today, we're diving into 1 Kings chapter 14. It's quite a chapter.
It really is. It's just this incredibly concentrated account of prophetic judgment and, well, immediate consequence in the newly divided kingdoms. Israel in the north, Judah in the south.
Exactly. And our mission here isn't just to recount history. This is theological history. We're looking at how the spiritual failures of two kings, Jeroboam and Rehoboam, led directly, almost instantly, to these devastating national tragedies.
And how their choices still echo, right?
Absolutely. We want to examine this emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, get the whole picture.
So just a quick summary. The chapter kicks off with Jeroboam dealing with his sick son, Abijah, which leads to this act of hypocrisy.
Right. He sends his wife in disguise to the prophet Ahijah.
Which brings down this absolutely scorching oracle of doom. We see Abijah's death fulfilling the prophecy, and then the focus shifts south.
To Judah, under Rehoboam. And it's a parallel story, really. Spiritual decline, idolatry, and then the physical consequence. Shishak of Egypt invading and plundering Jerusalem.
And a mirror image of failure, north and south. A really intense chapter packed into just 31 verses.
It is. And it hammers home this idea that personal spiritual compromise doesn't stay private. It inevitably leads to public national vulnerability. The structure itself tells that story.
Okay, so let's jump into part 1. Verses 1 to 6, it all starts with a crisis. Jeroboam's son, Abijah, is gravely ill.
The ultimate personal crisis for a king, for any parent. It forces him to look beyond his own power structures.
And the irony hits you right away, doesn't it? The boy's name, Abijah.
It means YHWH is my father.
Which is just staggering, given that Jeroboam is the king who set up the golden calves at Bethel and Dan precisely to stop people worshiping YHWH in Jerusalem.
The child's very name is a rebuke to his father's entire political and religious project. It frames the crisis from the outset. This is about the God Jeroboam tried to sideline.
So, faced with this, Jeroboam doesn't turn to the priests he himself appointed, does he?
No, he completely bypasses his own state-sponsored religion. His plan, in verse 2, is to send his wife to the prophet Ahijah in Shiloh.
But not openly. She has to go in disguise. Why?
Well, this reveals his deep psychological conflict, what we call cognitive dissonance. Jeroboam knew Ahijah was a true prophet. Ahijah was the one who prophesied his kingship back in chapter 11.
Right. He owed his crown to Ahijah's word.
Exactly. But since then, Jeroboam has fundamentally betrayed God's mandate by setting up those idols. He knows he stands condemned. He can't face Ahijah as King Jeroboam because that would mean acknowledging his sin, repenting, maybe even dismantling the calves, which was the political bedrock of his kingdom.
So the disguise is his way out.
It's his attempt to manage the contradiction. He wants the benefit of God's prophet, the information about his son, without the accountability for his own actions. He's trying to get a piece of God's power without submitting to God's authority.
It's like he's trying to create a loophole in the divine system. Send an anonymous woman, get the answer, and King Jeroboam the idolater remains untouched.
Precisely. He's trying to compartmentalize his life, his faith, his kingship. It's a profound act of spiritual hypocrisy.
And the preparations in verse 3, they reinforce this whole charade.
Yes. She takes these modest gifts, 10 loaves, some cakes or cracknels, and a jar of honey. Things a common woman might bring. It's all part of maintaining the disguise.
Trying to appear humble, maybe even hoping to soften the prophet a bit?
Perhaps. But the irony is just dripping, isn't it? She brings physical food, symbols of life and sustenance to the prophet.
While her husband, Jeroboam, has been spiritually starving the entire nation with his false religion. It's a stark contrast.
And then there's the location, Shiloh. This wasn't just any town.
No, this was the ancient center of worship, right? Where the tabernacle stood for centuries.
Yeah, exactly. It represented the authentic covenant center that Jeroboam had deliberately rejected for his politically convenient shrines at Bethel and Dan. Sending his wife back there is, in itself, a subconscious admission of where the real spiritual power lies.
So the queen makes this long, probably grief-stricken journey, arrives in disguise, and it's all for nothing.
Utterly pointless. Ahijah, the text tells us in verse 4, is old and physically blind. His eyes were set. He can't see her disguise.
But he sees everything that matters.
Because the Lord reveals it all. Before she even opens her mouth, God tells Ahijah who she is, why she's there, and exactly what message to deliver.
That's such a powerful image, isn't it? Physical blindness, but perfect spiritual sight.
It's a key allegory. God's vision penetrates all human attempts at deception, the disguise, the gifts, the careful planning. None of it matters before divine omniscience.
And Ahijah doesn't waste any time. Verse 6, the confrontation is immediate.
No pleasantries. He just says, "Come in, wife of Jeroboam. Why are you pretending to be someone else? I have heavy news for you." Boom! The facade is instantly shattered.
Heavy tidings. You feel the weight of that. Jeroboam wanted comfort, a quick fix. He gets the opposite.
It establishes the nature of true prophecy. It's not about making rulers comfortable. It's about delivering God's unvarnished truth no matter how harsh. The spiritual battle here is God's word cutting straight through the king's lies.
So Ahijah launches into this oracle, this judgment. And it starts, interestingly, by reminding Jeroboam of God's grace.
Yes, verses 7 and 8. God says, essentially, I lifted you up from nothing. I tore the kingdom away from Solomon's son and gave it to you.
Why start there?
It's a classic prophetic technique. It highlights the magnitude of Jeroboam's betrayal. He wasn't just any king. He was raised up by God's direct intervention. He owed everything to God's grace, which makes his subsequent idolatry even more egregious. The greater the gift, the greater the accountability.
Then comes the comparison that must have stung. David.
Right. Jeroboam is explicitly measured against David, and David, despite his own terrible sins, like with Bathsheba and Uriah.
The text says David followed me with all his heart.
That's the crucial difference. David's heart, though flawed, remained fundamentally oriented towards God. He sinned grievously, but he repented, and he never led the nation into systemic idolatry. Jeroboam did. He made idolatry the state religion.
Which leads to the charge in verse 9. Jeroboam did evil above all that were before thee. He set a new low.
A chilling verdict. And the specifics are laid out. Making other gods and molten images the calves and instituting this idolatry systemically, and then that incredibly vivid phrase,
You have cast me behind your back.
It's such a powerful image of contempt. It's not just ignoring God. It's actively pushing him away, dismissing him as irrelevant. Jeroboam's sin wasn't just personal. It was political, institutional, and profoundly disrespectful. He basically created a national environment where God was scorned.
And the punishment fits the crime, doesn't it? It's absolute dynastic annihilation.
Verse 10, total. God vows to cut off from Jeroboam every last male, whether slave or free. It's a guarantee that his line will end completely.
And the language used is just brutal. His dynasty will be taken away, as a man taketh away dung till it be all gone.
It's deliberately degrading. Think about it. A royal house meant for glory and legacy, reduced to worthless refuse, excrement to be scraped away and forgotten. It strips away every shred of honor.
And then the final indignity in verse 11, no proper burial.
Yes. Those dying in the city eaten by dogs, those in the fields by vultures. This was the ultimate curse in that culture. It echoes the curses in Deuteronomy for breaking the covenant. It signifies complete abandonment by God and public shame.
It's utterly devastating. But then, verses 12 and 13, there's this pause, this strange moment focusing on the sick child, Abijah.
Right. Ahijah delivers the immediate sign. The boy will die the very moment his mother sets foot back in their city, Tirzah.
That precision is terrifying.
It is, and it serves a purpose. To absolutely confirm the truth and power of Ahijah's prophetic word. It also places this immense emotional burden on the queen. Every step she takes on that journey home is a step closer to her son's death. You can only imagine her state of mind.
But amidst all this judgment, Abijah receives a unique grace. He alone will get a proper burial. Why?
Because, as verse 13 says, in him there is found some good thing toward the Lord God of Israel.
So even in this corrupt household, God sees and honors individual righteousness.
Exactly. It's a crucial theological point. God's judgment on the dynasty doesn't negate his awareness of the individual heart. Abijah stands out, maybe a quiet faithfulness, a different spirit. He's like a type of the righteous remnant.
And his early death, is it presented almost as a mercy?
In a way, yes. He's taken away before the full horror of his family's destruction unfolds, the violence and degradation prophesied in verses 10 and 11. He's spared from witnessing that, and perhaps from being corrupted himself. It's a protection from the coming evil, reminiscent of Isaiah 57.1.
The prophecy then zooms out again from the family to the nation, verses 14 to 16. Jeroboam's sin has wider consequences.
Much wider. God says he will raise up another king. We later learn this is Baasha, who will completely wipe out Jeroboam's remaining family. But the damage to the nation of Israel is already done.
And the imagery used for Israel is striking, as a reed is shaken in the water.
It's a powerful metaphor for instability. Reeds are shallow-rooted, easily tossed about by wind and currents. They lack firmness, resilience. Jeroboam's political idolatry robbed Israel of its true foundation in God, leaving it vulnerable, rootless.
Contrasting sharply with the image of the righteous as a firmly planted tree.
Precisely. And this instability leads directly to the prophecy of exile in verse 15. God will root up Israel out of this good land and scatter them beyond the river, meaning the Euphrates. This foretells the Assyrian exile centuries later.
And the reason given connects directly back to the idolatry Jeroboam started.
Yes, verse 16 is explicit. Jeroboam's sins caused Israel to sin, leading them to make their groves, or Asherah poles, provoking God's anger. The calves opened the door, and the wider Canaanite practices, especially Asherah worship, sealed the nation's fate.
Okay, so the first part of the prophecy unfolds exactly as foretold. Verses 17-20. The queen gets back to Tirzah.
And the moment she crosses the threshold, the child dies. The word is confirmed instantly and tragically. Jeroboam reigns 22 years, but his dynasty is doomed.
And then verse 21, the narrative pivots. We shift south to Judah, ruled by Rehoboam, Solomon's son.
Right. He reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city God specifically chose. His mother, Nana, was an Ammonite, which perhaps hints at foreign influences right from the start.
And you'd think, okay, Judah has the temple, the legitimate priesthood, they should be the faithful ones. But no.
Quite the opposite. Verse 22 says Judah did evil, provoking God's jealousy with sins above all that their fathers had done.
Worse than their fathers. That's shocking. In just the first 5 years of Rehoboam's reign, really. How?
It seems to be wholesale adoption of Canaanite religious practices, verse 23. They built high places, sacred fillers, mass book often phallic symbols linked to Baal, and Asherah poles, representing the consort goddess, everywhere. On every high hill and under every green tree. It's pervasive.
It's complete religious blending, syncretism, trading Yahweh for local fertility gods.
Exactly. They're trying to secure agricultural prosperity and physical well-being through pagan means rather than covenant faithfulness. And then verse 24 gives us the most explicit sign of the moral collapse.
The Sodomites in the land, or as modern translations often render it, male shrine prostitutes.
Yes, the Kodeshim. Their presence signifies just how deeply Judah had sunk into Canaanite fertility cult practices.
Can you unpack why this specific practice was so offensive, so abominable in the context of the covenant?
Well, these Canaanite cults often involved ritual sex. They believed that by mimicking the sexual union of their gods, often through temple prostitutes, both male and female, they could magically compel the gods to grant fertility to the land, animals, and people. It was sympathetic magic.
So for Israel, this was wrong on multiple levels.
Absolutely. First, it's gross sexual immorality, directly violating God's law. Second, it's profound spiritual adultery. The relationship between God and Israel is portrayed as a marriage. Engaging in these cultic sexual rites was like participating in ritualized unfaithfulness against YHWH himself. It showed a complete abandonment of their unique covenant identity.
It really underscores how leadership failure, Jeroboam's political compromise, Rehoboam's spiritual laziness or indulgence, just opens the floodgates.
It leads directly to national judgment. Because they'd abandoned the covenant, their divine protection was gone. So verse 25, in Rehoboam's 5th year, Shishak, king of Egypt, marches up and attacks Jerusalem.
And this isn't legend. Shishak's campaign is historically documented in Egypt.
Correct. But the Bible writer isn't just giving a historical note. He frames this invasion theologically. Shishak becomes God's instrument of judgment. Judah's spiritual failure made them militarily vulnerable. This is the behind-the-scenes spiritual reality breaking into the geopolitical realm.
Shishak plunders the temple and the palace, but the writer specifically highlights one loss in verse 26.
Yes. All the shields of gold that Solomon had made.
Why focus on the shields?
Because they were symbols. Solomon's golden shields represented the peak of Israel's glory, wealth, prestige, and the sense of divine blessing and protection under his rule. Gold signifies enduring value, incorruptibility, divine light. Losing them was like losing the very substance of their former glory.
And Rehoboam's reaction in verse 27 is just pitiful, isn't it?
It really is. Instead of repenting or seeking God, he just tries to cover up the loss. He replaces the solid gold shields with bronze shields.
Bronze, a cheaper common metal prone to tarnish.
Exactly. It's the perfect metaphor for their spiritual state. They lost the real thing, the gold of genuine faith and divine favor, and replaced it with a cheap imitation. They're trying to maintain the outward appearance of strength and glory, but the substance is gone.
And it gets worse. Verse 28 says these bronze shields weren't even used regularly.
No. They were kept in the guardhouse and only brought out ceremonially when the king went to the temple. Then they were immediately put back.
So it's purely for show, a hollow ritual.
It's hypocrisy cast in metal. Keeping up appearances in the holy place, carrying these symbols of diminished glory, pretending everything is fine, while the reality is they've been stripped bare. The bronze shields are a constant, visible reminder of what they lost through unfaithfulness. They're hiding their shame behind a cheap facade.
The chapter ends noting Rehoboam's death and the ongoing state of war between Judah and Israel. These two kings set the stage for centuries of conflict. Okay, let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture here, pulling together the different dimensions of this story. Emotionally, it's quite a ride.
Definitely. You feel Jeroboam's panic, the queen's awful journey weighted with dread, the grief over Abijah, and then the national shame and humiliation in Judah as Shishak just walks in and takes their treasures.
And psychologically, Jeroboam's story is fascinating. That need to disguise himself, to avoid accountability.
It's that classic attempt to compartmentalize, isn't it? Wanting God's help on his own terms, refusing to integrate his faith with his political actions. It leads to this exhausting internal conflict.
And socially, we see how quickly the leader's choices poison the well for everyone else.
Absolutely. Jeroboam's calves corrupt the North's worship systemically. Rehoboam's laxity allows Canaanite cults, including shrine prostitution, to become embedded in Judah. Leadership sets the moral and spiritual tone for better or worse. Here, it was definitely for worse.
Now, thinking about the spiritual dimension, the unseen battles, Jeroboam setting up the calves wasn't just bad politics, was it?
No, it was fundamentally an act of spiritual warfare. He wasn't just offering an alternative. He was creating an environment where other gods, demonic influences, could take root and flourish, essentially inviting judgment by rejecting YHWH's exclusive claim.
And Ahijah's prophecy is the divine counterattack.
Exactly. The power of the prophetic word cuts through the deception, exposes the darkness, and reaffirms God's ultimate sovereignty over kings and nations. It's a clash between God's authority and human rebellion.
We also see God working through unexpected agents, like Shishak.
Yes. The story shows God's divine economy operating behind the scenes. He can use even pagan rulers, like the king of Egypt, to fulfill his purposes and execute covenant judgments. History isn't random. God is weaving his plan through it all.
And the figure of Abijah, the child with the good thing found in him. What's his significance typologically?
He really stands as a type of the righteous remnant. His story confirms that God sees and values individual faithfulness even within a corrupt system. And his removal before the final destruction can be seen as an act of protective mercy, ensuring the righteous don't suffer the full weight of the judgment poured out on the wicked.
So how does this ancient story speak to us today? What are the modern echoes?
Oh, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Jeroboam's hypocrisy, seeking God in a crisis, but living a life of compromise that's timeless, isn't it? We could call it emergency faith.
And the golden calves today might not be statues.
No, but they can be anything we elevate above God for our own security or convenience career, comfort, political ideology, national pride, you name it. We subtly build shrines to these things, wanting God's blessing without God's lordship.
The story also hits hard on family legacy, doesn't it? Abijah's fate is directly tied to his father's sin.
It's a stark reminder that the choices of one generation, especially those in leadership or parental roles, have profound consequences for the next.
And Judah's syncretism, mixing faith with pagan culture.
That's a huge warning for us culturally. How easily do we blend prevailing secular values or even immoral practices with a nominal faith to make it seem more relevant or acceptable? We end up trading the gold of authentic, transformative faith for the bronze of cultural accommodation.
The bronze shields.
Exactly. We maintain the outward forms, the rituals, the look of faith, but the substance, the power, the real glory is gone. It's a cheap imitation.
And nationally, the link between moral decay and vulnerability.
The chapter draws a direct line. Spiritual compromise led to military defeat and national humiliation. Leaders who prioritize political expediency or popular approval over moral and spiritual integrity ultimately weaken the nation. It's a principle woven through Scripture. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people.
It all comes back to that inability to hide, doesn't it? Jeroboam thought the disguise would work.
His whole scheme was futile. It's a universal picture of trying to conceal sin from God. You just can't. God's sight penetrates every disguise, every pretense. The truth eventually comes out, and consequences follow. #tag outro.
So, wrapping up this deep dive into 1 Kings 14, the central theme seems unavoidable. The price of compromise is always higher than the cost of obedience.
That's it, exactly. Jeroboam and Rehoboam inherited kingdoms built on God's promise, but they chose convenience, political safety, or personal indulgence over faithfulness to the covenant. And the result was swift, devastating ruin.
For you listening, perhaps the biggest takeaway is the stark reality of the prophetic word. It's certain. It was confirmed in the tragic, immediate death of that child.
And it reminds us that God sees everything we try to hide. Judgment isn't arbitrary. It flows directly from the choices we make, especially when we choose against the light and truth He provides. It might seem severe, but the text presents it as just.
Which leaves us with that final provocative thought, centered on that powerful image from Judah's story. We really have to ask ourselves, don't we, where are our personal bronze shields hiding today?
What true, valuable spiritual glory, maybe intimacy with God, moral integrity, courageous witness have we traded away for a cheap, shiny imitation? What facade are we maintaining? Maybe only bringing it out for show, hoping the bronze will fool everyone, maybe even ourselves, into thinking we still possess the gold.